A wolf had sheep to eat. That's why the pack was very strong. Every wolf had a full belly. Every wolf was very happy. Then one season, the meadows dried up. The sheep grew thin. Their numbers were almost the same, but the meat that came from each one was far less. The wolf was still hungry. The wolf still needed meat to trade with other wolves. And life was no longer so good. This is inflation. To understand what inflation is, we first need to know this. In the world of wolves, meat is money. Every day, wolves trade meat in exchange for shelter, trade it in exchange for grooming services, trade it to maintain their status within the pack. Meat is extremely valuable to every wolf in the valley, because without meat there is no trade, and without trade the pack economy cannot move forward and collapses. And here we should add this too: meat is not just food, it is also a marker of trust. The more meat a wolf holds, the more reliable a trading partner that wolf is considered, because it is proof that he can keep his promises in the future. That's why meat is used not only to fill bellies, but also to build reputation in trade. But there's a problem here. Every wolf wants meat, but sheep don't multiply forever. In some valley sheep are abundant, in others there are none at all. So where does a wolf find meat? In the old days, wolves would simply chase after whatever was nearby at that moment. But in today's world, wolves now manage entire herds, count them, protect them from rival packs, and transport and trade them across the whole territory. When a healthy flock of sheep is found, a sense of relief is felt across the entire pack, because that flock means security for the months ahead. But there's a small truth here: meat doesn't last long. Today's abundance is not tomorrow's guarantee. That's why every herd must be managed carefully. How many sheep were born, how many grew up, how much the territory can truly sustain, all of it must be constantly calculated. When a flock is found, that meat is immediately divided into 4 parts: the share stored to get through winter, the share set aside for trade with neighboring packs, the pup's share, and the emergency share that is never touched. And then comes the question of how this meat will reach the other end of the territory. Wolf packs do this through trade routes, long trails stretching from valley to valley. These trails carry meat from where sheep are plentiful to where sheep are scarce. But this journey is never easy, because weather conditions, rival packs, and unexpected landslides always stand as a threat. Now we come to the truly crucial part of the matter. The vast majority of the territory's meat actually comes from just 3 great meadows: the northern region, the river basin, and the high plains. In other words, roughly 30% of all the meat the valley consumes comes from these 3 regions. And sheep don't suddenly appear everywhere. They have to be moved from one place to another, which brings us to this point: a large portion of the trade routes must pass through a single narrow mountain pass. This pass is called Hollow Ridge, which is a pitiful name because the pass looks neither hollow nor like a ridge. It's just a narrow, cramped corridor. But what matters isn't its name. What matters is this: 1/5 of all meat shipments pass through this place. If this pass closes, the meat supply drops dramatically, prices rise, and the entire valley falls into panic. So why do prices rise and fall so easily? The answer is simple: supply and demand. If meat is plentiful, meat is cheap. If meat is scarce, meat is expensive. And demand never stops, because as the pack grows, the need for meat grows with it. When supply suddenly slows, most regions have reserve stocks they've built up, which keeps prices stable for a while. But if the problem isn't solved quickly, those reserves run out sooner or later, and that's the point where the real crisis begins. The things that cause these disruptions aren't just one thing either: harsh weather conditions, broken down herding equipment, not enough wolves investing in better methods, newly introduced herding rules, and of course tensions between neighboring packs. And here's an interesting truth: among wolves, none of these disruptions is devastating on its own. What's truly devastating is when several disruptions pile up at the same time. For example, a bad winter season alone can be managed, but if a bad winter season coincides with a trade route dispute, the impact multiplies. That's exactly why experienced packs account not just for a single risk, but for the probability of multiple risks happening at once. But before we get into what actually happens when the meat supply truly stops, let's open a short parenthesis for today's sponsor. Because there's a truth every wolf knows: running your own trading post is exhausting. Tracking every trade one by one, paying the young wolves, guarding the herd on time, wrestling with never-ending paperwork, it's all truly draining. This is where today's sponsor comes in and takes on most of that burden: automating payments, preparing listings for wolves looking to join a new pack, simplifying the confusing paperwork. As a result, the wolf can finally focus on what really matters: growing the trading post, building up reserves, and finally being able to breathe a little. If a wolf can do it, so can you. You can check the link in the description, and we thank today's sponsor for supporting this video. Now let's get to the main topic: what happens when the meat supply truly stops? A small disruption in the herd creates an enormous ripple effect across the entire territory. When the meat supply shrinks, it doesn't just affect the price of meat, it affects the price of everything meat is used for: trade agreements, grooming services, den repairs, healing herbs, even status symbols within the pack. Beyond that, this situation shakes the entire supply chain: growing the herd, transporting it, protecting it, storing it for winter, and finally even the ordinary wolf simply waiting for dinner is part of this chain. And strangely, prices always go up, never down, because as the price rises, traders try to buy more meat and sell it at even higher prices, which pushes the price even higher, and this cycle feeds itself. Now let's illustrate this with a real example, the Hollow Ridge dispute. One season, the Eastern Pack and the River Pack couldn't agree on hunting rights near the pass. Tensions rose quickly, trade slowed, and both sides increased their patrols in the area. No one thought this would have massive consequences, but it did. The Eastern Pack didn't have the strength to confront the River Pack directly, but they could turn geography to their advantage. Because the Eastern Pack controlled the lands right next to that narrow pass, and they were not at all happy with the situation. So they began warning passing caravans, don't go through the pass, don't take the risk. They never needed to physically close the pass, simply making it risky enough to cross did the job perfectly well. The result came very quickly, 80% of trade caravans stopped using this pass entirely. Traffic that once flowed freely now stalls, everyone waits in line to pass in front of each other because caravan leaders don't want to put their herds at risk, and the pack's trade guarantors no longer cover losses that could occur on that road. So what happens next? No one knows for sure, but there are three possible scenarios ahead of us. First, things get better. The packs resolve the dispute, the pass becomes safe again, caravans return to their normal flow, meat flows freely, prices fall, and the valley breathes again. Second, things continue as they are. The packs don't enter open conflict, but trust never forms either. The pass remains technically open but is still considered risky. Some caravans take their chances while most don't. The meat supply stays unstable. Prices go up and down but the overall direction is always upward. Third, and the worst, the situation becomes completely blocked. The pass becomes so dangerous that no caravan can risk it anymore, and roughly 1/5 of the territory's total meat supply vanishes overnight. Every wolf in the valley immediately understands what this means, prices spike sharply, and this time no one is prepared for it. This is exactly why wolves try not to remain so dependent on a single trade route, or at least, they should. Because depending on a single pass, a single region, a single neighboring pack means that even a small dispute can shake the entire valley. The solution seems very simple but is hard to implement, diversifying the valleys you trade with, strengthening reserve stocks, and building good relations with multiple neighboring packs at the same time. But the real truth is that most wolves still keep trusting, and want to keep trusting, the fastest and most familiar route, because change always takes time, and it's something that must be done before the crisis, not during it. Now let's expand on this a bit, because there's a point here, neither small nor large, that gets overlooked. Inflation doesn't come from a single cause, it comes from the sum of small accumulating effects. Think about it, the tension at Hollow Ridge doesn't just affect the caravans using that pass, it also creates a chain reaction in every pack that buys the meat those caravans carry. When a pack buys meat at a high price, it's forced to sell the meat it sets aside from its own herd to neighboring packs at a higher price too. That neighboring pack then shrinks the share it gives its own young wolves, or demands more work from them. In other words, tension at a single pass can seep all the way into a den at the other end of the map, and this is the truly dangerous side of inflation, an invisible pressure that spreads everywhere. So what does a wolf do in this situation? This is where the concept of the reserve comes into play. Very, very smart packs don't immediately consume all the meat they have in times of abundance, they set a portion aside. This is not just a tradition passed down from our ancestors, it's a genuine survival strategy. Because when scarcity comes, the pack that holds reserves is far less affected by rising prices, while the pack with no reserves at all faces prices that rise every single day and eventually becomes dependent on neighboring packs. This also shifts the balance of power among wolves. The pack that holds meat gains a slightly more advantageous position every passing day over the pack that doesn't. Another real-life reflection of this is the following. Some packs build ties not to a single source, but to multiple valleys at the same time. That is, they establish trade relationships not only with the northern region, but also with the river basin and the high plains. This may look more costly in the short term, because managing multiple routes at once takes more effort. But in the long term, when a problem breaks out in one valley, the other two step in and maintain the balance. This is the exact equivalent of what's called supply diversification in the real world, and in the world of wolves, the packs that practice it come out of crises with far fewer wounds. So do the valley's oldest and most experienced wolves, the pack council, simply stand by and watch during such moments of crisis? No. This is where a great structure found in every valley, known as the Grand Council, comes into play. The Grand Council's job is to monitor the meat supply and the flow of trade, and to take balancing steps when necessary. For example, when supply slows down excessively, the Grand Council can release a portion of its own reserve stores into the market, slowing down how fast prices rise. Or conversely, when meat becomes overly abundant and prices fall too far, this time it can temporarily discourage some trader wolves from buying, preventing the market from collapsing. This is nearly the exact equivalent of what real-world central banks do with interest rates, breaking when things heat up and stimulating when things freeze over. But the Grand Council has its limits too. If the root of the problem is truly a physical obstacle, that is, if a pass like Hollow Ridge is genuinely unusable, the Grand Council's reserves cannot cover up that problem forever. Reserves buy time, but they don't solve the actual problem. The real solution is either for the past to become safe again, or for the packs to find an entirely different route. And this shows us something: short-term interventions can manage a crisis, but a long-term solution always requires conditions in the real world, that is, in the valley, to change. And right at this point, a small lesson emerges that even an ordinary wolf can learn. If a wolf runs his own small trade, he shouldn't make decisions based only on today's price. He should also question why the price is at that level. Because a high price sometimes signals a genuine shortage, and sometimes just a passing wave of fear. The wolf who can tell these two apart both avoids making bad decisions in a panic and can recognize an opportunity when one appears. And so now we understand, the region's meat price depends not only on the number of sheep in that region, but also on where that meat comes from, how it's transported, and which single choke points it's forced to pass through. A single narrow pass, a single dispute, can change the economy of an entire valley. And this also shows that inflation isn't really just prices are rising. The real power lies in understanding why and how prices rise. And as always, let's not forget, the pack is far stronger together. If you'd like to learn how wolf economics works in other areas, you can check out the other recommended videos.